What you see over there is elite modern-day wheat lines that have a special ability to produce large amounts of antibiotics from the root systems. You may be wondering, why do we need antibiotics from the wheat root systems? You only take antibiotics when you are sick, isn't it? The agricultural systems, the modern farming systems have become increasingly sick lately. They are so sick that nearly 70% of the nitrogen fertilizers that are being applied to farmlands are being leaked out. They are leaking nitrogen uncontrollably. If you look at the nitrogen fertilizer consumption, from the beginning of Green Revolution, it has grown nearly 30-fold. From 5 million metric tons in the beginning of Green Revolution to 150 million metric tons, what we are currently using. A 30-fold increase in nitrogen fertilizer consumption has resulted in a 4-fold increase in global food grain production. Of course, we all know that Green Revolution has transformed the global food grain production, saved us from famine, food scarcities, and provided the global food security. But you have to ask yourself, a 30-fold increase in nitrogen fertilizer consumption is supporting only 4-fold increase in food grain production, food grain increase. What's happening? When you apply nitrogen fertilizers, it is mostly in ammonium form. Ammonium form binds to the soil, doesn't move, doesn't create any harmful nitrogen byproducts. There's no problem with ammonium nitrogen. But there is a little bacteria lives in the soil that started eating away this fertilizer nitrogen ammonium and spitting it out into nitrate. And also it's making many other harmful nitrogen byproducts. The problem with the nitrates is, though many plants can use nitrates as a nitrogen source, but nitrogen cannot bind to the soil. It washes out. If you have rain, if you have irrigation, it washes out from the farmlands. That is the problem. This little bacteria used to be a small, subdued microbial activity in the overall the soil biological activity, has grown now into a monster. It's consuming nearly 95 to 99% of the fertilizer nitrogen and spitting it out into nitrates. We should be asking, are we fertilizing our crops? Are we fertilizing this little bacteria, which we have helped it to grow into a big monster? This is what happens when the nitrogen moves into water streams, pollutes lakes, triggers algal blooms, and creates another green revolution. If you don't keep the nitrogen in farmlands, if you allow it to move into the water bodies, into the larger ecosystem, it creates another green revolution in an ecologically destructive way. If you look at the soil, it's a living biological system, an invisible microbial world. There's a large microbial universe operating in these soil systems. They are involved in numerous functions, breaking down everything into individual components, nourishing our crops to grow and produce food. It's so complex. It's much, much bigger than the ecosystem what we know. The ecosystem above the ground, what we know. It's much more complex. Just to give you an example, a gram of soil would have about 10 billion microbial cells. 10 billion microbes in a gram of soil doing various functions. It's much larger than the entire human population, what you see on Earth. This microbial universe is affected so severely from the last 7 decades of Green Revolution. Particularly, the infusion of large amounts of nitrogen fertilizers caused disruption to this microbial activity and changed the population dynamics. As I said, what used to be a small, insignificant microbial activity in the soils has grown into a monstrous proportions, sucking up all the fertilizer nitrogen what we are applying. Nature has evolved many solutions to some of the problems we are facing in agriculture and some of the problems we are going to create and face in future. What you see is over there is a Brachiara tropical pasture grass. It grows extensively in South America. It has a unique ability. It produces large amounts of antibiotics from the root systems. These antibiotics are specifically directed at this little bacteria, we say the nitrifying bacteria. Because of that, it tightly controls this nitrifying bacteria function in the soil. It doesn't allow it to function. It doesn't kill that bacteria, but it doesn't allow it to function, just to keep them in a kind of coma state. Because of that, you don't see any kind of nitrate formation in these tropical pastures, particularly this tropical pasture grass. And also you don't see any nitrogen gas emitted from these pastures. No nitrous oxide is emitted from these pastures because it controls this bacteria so tightly by producing large amounts of antibiotics from the root systems. The question is, how do we bring this kind of ability into our crop plants? Most of our food production comes from 4 crops: wheat, maize, rice, and sorghum. These are the 4 crops that provide the global food security. Almost 80 to 90% of the food grains are produced from these 4 crops. And also, these 4 crops consume more than 90% of the entire nitrogen fertilizer produced industrially goes to these 4 production systems. These food crops, these staple crops, don't have much ability. That's the reason they are leaking. So if you look at this is a wild wheat. It has the ability to produce 20 to 30 times antibiotics from the root systems. Our group has worked for the last 15 years to try and locate the genomic region responsible for producing these antibiotics and transfer it to the cultivated wheat. We have done it. You see that the orangish part of the chromosome that is coming from the wild wheat, which is coding the antibiotics. We have got that integrated with the wheat genome without disrupting the elite architecture of the wheat system, and also without disrupting the yield potential, and without interfering with the bread-making quality of the wheat. These new category of wheats we call BNI wheats, the wheats that can produce large amounts of antibiotics from the root systems to control this bacteria so that they can control the nitrate production in the root systems. Because of this, the nitrogen fertilizer, whatever we are applying, would stay in the root zone. It doesn't leak. Look at the BNI wheats, where it looks quite healthy and green. You see the right side, that is the current modern wheats, which leaks out all the nitrogen, whatever we have applied. Both the plots were applied the same amount of nitrogen, exactly the same time. In one case, it leached out. In the other case, it remained in the farmlands. These are the BNI weeds. These are the next generation weeds under development. So in a few years from now, they will be available to the farmers. So our hope is in the next 10 years, most of the weeds that are grown in different parts of the world would have this kind of ability so that the nitrogen leakage can be stopped by infusing these large amount of antibiotics from the root systems. That's what is going to control, that's what is going to reduce the amount of nitrogen fertilizers in future in wheat root systems. Thank you.